Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel. This is the summary of the 1976 season and the introduction to the 1977 season. I had a little bit of trouble with the recording prior to this attempt here. So I've already kind of played through, or not played through, but set up the 1977 season. But before I do that, I wanted to go back and sort of do a quick summary of what occurred in 1976. So let me go back and let's take a look at that. For those of you who are familiar with my channel, probably saw that the Oakland Raiders were able to defeat the Minnesota Vikings in Super Bowl 11, um, which was the first time in my simulation that, at least in the Super Bowl era, that you had the same two teams meeting that occurred in real life. And in fact, the Raiders beat the Vikings in real life pretty convincingly. In this game, the score appeared to be a little bit closer, although when you break things down, it actually reflected a game that had the Raiders winning pretty convincingly late in the ball game. Minnesota did score late to make it respectable, but the Raiders really, except for being down 3-0 in the first quarter, they were pretty much ahead after they first scored their touchdown. From then on out, and if you look at the stats of this game, it was interesting. The Vikings actually led in most categories. Raiders had one more first down. They did have more time of possession, but the Vikings outgained the Raiders in both rushing and in passing. The real determining factor were the turnovers. Two big interceptions that occurred in the second quarter, both by Phil Villapiano, the Raiders linebacker, intercepting um, Fran Tarkenton on two consecutive drives, both leading to touchdowns for Oakland. And that really was the main difference in the ball game. Penalties also didn't help the Vikings. They were penalized 8 times for 71 yards. The Raiders, who were often the most penalized team in football, even back then, in fact, more so back then, only had two penalties for 30 yards. So going a little bit against their character there. They had a good, clean game and did everything right to win this game. The MVP was Otis Sistrunk, although you could make a strong case that Phil Villapiano also might have earned that MVP award with his two interceptions. Um, so, so nevertheless, this was an interesting season from the aspect of it just being relatively accurate and plausible, um, compared to real life history. The only real difference was, you didn't have the Steelers in the conference title game. Raiders or the Colts beat the Steelers in the divisional playoff game, and the NFC Championship game was the exact same matchup as well. It was Minnesota hosting Los Angeles, and winning pretty convincingly there, as they did in real life. Um, there's the divisional playoff. The only real difference there was the Bears were there instead of the Cowboys. And in the AFC, you had Cincinnati getting in as opposed to New England. Again, not implausible. The Bengals were probably the best team in the AFC that did not make the playoffs. So, so again, relatively plausible across the board there, and how things played out. So that was the 1976 season. Again, I thought it was a pretty good year overall, um, in terms of how things played out, with the Raiders winning their second world championship, second in 3 years, their third straight Super Bowl appearance, and their fifth overall. So, so the Raiders definitely making a claim for being team of the decade so far in the 1970s. Pittsburgh's only appearance so far was in '72, as was the Cowboys so far. The Cowboys and Steelers both, which were perennial Super Bowl contenders during the '70s. Both teams coming up empty, except for 1972, in which Dallas emerged victorious in that ball game. So interesting stuff. 1977 season has been loaded. Um, So, as I like to do, I like to kind of go through and see how things look in terms of the new or the current t- uh, league structure. Everything is pretty much the same from 76. The only difference is with Tampa Bay and Seattle. Those are the two expansion teams in 76. Tampa Bay started out in the AFC West. The Seahawks were in the NFC West. They have swapped for 1977 and are in the same divisions they will remain in until at least I think it's 2002 when the league realigns again. But you can see Tampa Bay now in the NFC Central and the Seahawks now part of the AFC West. Looking at the team's overall ratings going into 1977, I think the Cowboys are the top rated team, which probably stands to reason given that they did win the Super Bowl in 77. So they're going to come in as heavy favorites, especially in the NFC East, where they're about 8 overall points better than the next best team, which is their arch rivals, the Redskins. So we'll just have to see how that plays out. In the NFC Central, you've got a pretty tight, or you should have a pretty tight race between Minnesota and Chicago, which will match what happened in real life. In the West, the Rams clearly continue to be the class of that division. So I would anticipate that they will be the favorites to win that division. Moving over to the NFC, or sorry, the AFC, Baltimore again is going to be a powerhouse. In Miami, that the team that sort of fell back in '76 had a disappointing year. Um, they're going to be a contender in '77, along with New England. New England won't be far behind them, so I would suspect that both those teams will contend with Baltimore for the division title there in the AFC Central. Um, I would expect Pittsburgh would be the top team there, followed closely by Houston and Cincinnati. And then in the West, you're going to have a battle between Denver and Oakland. You know, Denver being they were the Cinderella team there in real life, and they will contend for the title along with the Raiders, who are going to enter the '77 season as defending Super Bowl champs, as they did in real life. Okay, so let's look at the transactions. So first, we'll look at the teams or the movements of the veteran players from one team to the next. We'll just look at the big names here. Lyle Blackwood coming over from Seattle to Baltimore, along with Norm Thompson from St. Louis. So those are big moves for the Colts in '77. Let's see, Bills had quite a few players moving into their roster in '77. Not seeing any huge names, familiar names, but not huge names. Mike Phipps, um, who was a disappointment with the Browns, he's going to come over and be the starting quarterback for the Bears. Well, I don't know if he's a starting quarterback. I think he's going to back up Bob Avellini there in Chicago. Let's see, Denver. Denver made some big moves going into '77. The biggest probably was acquiring Craig Morton from the Giants. So you see, he's rated 69, so not great, but he was efficient in '77, leading that team's offense. The main strength there was, of course, their defense, but it didn't hurt having Craig Morton there as a veteran quarterback to lead that team. Bernard Jackson, of course, from Cincinnati, is a big contributor to that defense for the Broncos in '77. So continuing on here, going through the different movements there. Randy Vataha coming over from New England to Green Bay. Gary Garrison, the veteran wide receiver from the Chargers, goes to Houston, as does Tony Fritsch, uh, kicker from the Chargers to Houston. Excuse me, John Brockington from Green Bay to Kansas City. I think he joins MacArthur Lane there. So they were teammates in Green Bay. Now they'll be teammates again in Kansas City. There's Joe Namath, of course, moving over from the Jets to the Rams for his final season at age 34. So that's a notable change there. I see Bob Grimm. I think Bob Grimm was already on the Vikings, so that might be an error I'll have to look at for the 1976 season, because I don't think he was on the Giants. So I'll have to double check that. Let's see, anything else here? John Gilliam, veteran wideout from played, who was I think he was originally with the Vikings. Then he was with Atlanta. Now he's going over to New Orleans. Pat Hughes, linebacker from the Giants, goes to New Orleans. Let's see, anything else jumping out here? Pat Toomey goes to Oakland. Mike McCoy, defensive lineman, goes from Green Bay to Oakland. There's a big one. Ron Jaworski from the Rams over to the Eagles. Bob Klein going from Los Angeles to San Diego, as does James Harris. Not seeing anything too major here. Mike Curtis leaves the Seahawks and goes to the Redskins. All right, so that's pretty much it for the player movements in terms of veteran players. Let's go to the draft and see who's coming on board in the NFL for the first time. So Ricky Bell is the #1 draft pick. He goes to Tampa Bay. Not sure why Al Hunter is showing up here in the top as a 4th-round pick, but he goes to Seattle. You've got Dallas there picking Tony Dorsett. That's a big one. If those of you that recall, I believe there was a trade with the Seahawks and the Cowboys. I thought it was Niehaus, I think was his name. I thought he was in here as a draft pick for Seattle as the #1 pick. Or he wasn't the #1 pick, but he was close to #1 for Seattle. Steve Niehaus, I think that was his name. So anyway, Tony Dorsett from Pittsburgh goes to Dallas. Marvin Powell, offensive lineman, goes to the Jets. That was a big draft pick. I remember watching that. Gary Jeter going to the Giants. See if there's any other big names that jump out here. A.J. Due goes to Miami. Raymond Claiborne to the Patriots. Stanley Morgan to the Patriots. Dave Lewis to the Buccaneers. Wesley Walker to the Jets. See what else here. Pete Johnson to the Bengals. Tony Hill to the Cowboys. Jimmy Giles. I remember him with Tampa Bay. I don't remember him with Houston, but I guess he was drafted by the Oilers in '77, so he starts out his career with Houston. Rob Carpenter, who I know who ends up with the Giants, he starts out with Houston. See what else. We're now in the 4th round. Now the 5th round. There's one, Lester Hayes. He's drafted by the Raiders in the 5th round. That's a big one. Joe Klecko, drafted by the Jets in the 6th round. Wilbert Montgomery goes to Philadelphia in the 6th round. All right, we're getting into the 8th round here, soon to be the 9th round. Scott Studwell goes to the Vikings. Again, I'm just noticing the big names. Not necessarily all of them. Most of these are all familiar. Rolf Panershka goes to San Diego. And that's it. That's all the draft picks. Undrafted free agents, or at least guys that we don't have a draft designation for. So I assume these are all accurate. Oops. Don't see any huge names here. These are, again, all undrafted free agents. Eddie Payton, the brother of Walter, goes to Detroit as a kick returner, punt returner. Wendell Tyler. Don't remember him being an unsigned free agent, but maybe that, or undrafted free agent, but maybe that's what he was. Nolan Cromwell. I don't know. That might have to check this. These might. I don't know if these are correct. I think the Rams. Yeah, I think we're gonna have to check that because I think a lot of these guys were drafted. Some big names here: Nolan Cromwell, Bob Brzezinski, Billy Waddy, Wendell Tyler, as I mentioned before, Raphael Septien. Yeah, Rams will need to fix them. Bruce Harper goes to Jets. Joe Pisarcik. I know he was the starting quarterback for the Giants for a few years before Phil Simms came on board. There's Herman Edwards. Mark Murphy for the Redskins. Okay. All right. So there you go. Those are all the transactions. Excuse me. So, okay. So now let's go ahead and I think I already backed up the league. So we're good to go. Let's go ahead and let's play through the first half, or let's quick sim through the first half of the season. Let's see how this goes. And here we go with week number 1. So start things out. The Rams defeat the Falcons. Miami defeats Buffalo in a close one at Rich Stadium, 23-21. Let's see, Bears win, Browns win. Denver gets a big opening day win over St. Louis. Houston big over the Jets, 41-21. Similar score as the Denver game. Here's a key game I remember watching live on TV. Dallas beating Minnesota, and like in real life, that was a very close game. I remember being an overtime game, won by the Cowboys 16-10. This one is 17-15. Let's see how this one ended. Actually, the Cowboys were up quite a bit. They went up 17-2. I think this is the fourth quarter.
Touchdown!
There's Dorsett with the touchdown there. Vikings would rally, score 2 touchdowns late in the ball game. The last one coming with 14 seconds to go. Chuck Foreman on a short run.
Touchdown!
Turn down that audio a little bit. Where is that? Okay, let's go here and let's turn that down just a little bit. No offense, Chris, but that was really loud.
First down.
That's better. Okay. So Dallas wins that game. New England opens up with a big win over Kansas City. Saints beat the Packers 17-14. Low scoring game between the Giants and the Redskins. That's kind of an upset. Redskins, I think, coming into the season are a contender, so they lose 8-3. Nice baseball score there. The Raiders, defending champions, they defeat the Chargers in their opener. Philadelphia barely beats the Buccaneers, 14-13. Pittsburgh wins big over San Francisco. That was a Monday night game. I remember that one. And then Baltimore defeats Seattle, 31-10. All right, let's go to week 2. And reveal. And so now we've got Cincinnati. Okay, so the Bengals win their game. They even their record at 1-1. They beat the Seahawks. Let's see. New England beats Cleveland, so they're 2-0. Dallas goes to 2-0. They beat the Giants. Denver wins again. They're 2-0. They defeat Buffalo 34-24. Let's see, Detroit over New Orleans. Green Bay rebounds from their opening day loss. They beat the Houston Oilers 16-3. San Diego defeats Kansas City 27-14. The Rams defending. I was going to say they were defending. No, they're not defending NFC champions anymore. I have to remember I'm not in 76. I'm in 77. They lose to the Eagles. The Eagles are 2-0, defeating the Rams. That's an upset, 20-14 in Los Angeles. The Jets, now led by rookie quarterback Richard Todd, upset the Colts. Showdown game in Pittsburgh between the defending champion Raiders and the Steelers. The Steelers win 17-7. Let's take a look at that ball game. Raiders were down 14-0. They get an interception return for a touchdown. But yeah, the Steelers went up big in this ball game early on and held on to win.
It's caught. Touchdown.
So Pittsburgh wins 17-7 there. Let's see. Miami defeats San Francisco. They go to 2-0. The Cardinals win over the Bears relatively easily, with Terry Metcalf being the MVP, 27-6. The Vikings, even their record, they get back on into their winning ways, winning 35-3 over Tampa Bay. Redskins in another low-scoring game, not surprising though, against the Falcons, which were known for their defense in 77, but not for their offense. So they did lose a lot of games, even though they held their opponents to very few points and yards. Redskins win that game 9-3. All right, let's go to week number 3. All right. And we'll take a look at the standings after this week. I can see already we have a tie, excuse me. So Atlanta gets in the win column. They win 24-17. Baltimore recovers from their loss the week previous. They defeat winless Buffalo 13-3. Chicago wins big over New Orleans 38-7. Pittsburgh remains unbeaten. They defeat their rivals, the Browns, 30-14. Dallas wins big over the Buccaneers, 30-0. So we have two ties. Two ties, same score, 14-14. Philadelphia, Detroit. Oakland ties the Chiefs. So the Raiders are now 1-1-1. A little bit surprising there. All right. Rams defeat San Francisco. Oops. Don't really need to look at that game in too much depth, I don't think. 34-10. Keeps taking me in there. Miami wins 31-27 over Houston. That's a close ball game. They stay unbeaten. Vikings win again, this time over the Packers. Jets win again. They defeat New England 27-6. So Jets are on a little bit of a roll with 2 straight wins. Cincinnati defeats San Diego. Denver, Denver stays unbeaten. They defeat Seattle. And the Redskins lose another low-scoring game, 14-13, this time to the Cardinals. All right, let's take a step back. Let's look at the standings. So through 3 weeks, we've got Dallas ahead of everybody in the East. Not by much, though. The Eagles are only half game back. Minnesota and Chicago tied in the Central. Rams ahead in the West. Miami ahead in the East, with the Jets, Baltimore, and New England right behind them. Pittsburgh ahead in the Central. And Denver ahead in the West. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice here. Let's look at the injuries real quick. A lot of injuries. Holy cow. And that's a big one. Burt Jones being out for the Colts. That's critical. For those of you that remember the Colts of the late 70s, they pretty much lived and died with Burt Jones. If they didn't have him, they were a different team. They were just a completely different team without Burt Jones. They won with Burt Jones. They lost without him. That's pretty much the bottom line. Terry Bradshaw out 2 weeks as well for the Steelers. Cowboys missing 2 of their major contributors, Jethro Pugh on defense, Drew Pearson on offense, just for 1 week though. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's go to week 4. Let's simulate these games. Oh, wait a minute. Let me just see. Here we go. Okay. So Dallas is, I like to see the Cowboys in their blue jerseys against the Cardinals. So let's change those. And we'll sim that game. And now we can sim the rest of the games. There we go. Reveal. So the Colts give Miami their first loss by 1 point, 15-14. Those 2 teams are now both 3-1. The Bills get their first win this time over the Jets, 28-24. The Bears defeat Los Angeles. That's a big game there. The Raiders defeat Cleveland. Denver stays unbeaten. They defeat Kansas City. Green Bay and Cincinnati are both 2-2 after the Packers defeat the Bengals. The Steelers get an overtime win over the Houston Oilers. Let's take a look at this one. Neil Graff. I don't remember Neil Graff, but evidently he was their backup in '77. So he's playing for the injured Terry Bradshaw. And let's take a look how the Steelers were able to pull this off. So in overtime, Donnie Shell picks off Dan Pastorini.
Interception.
Yep. And let's see what happens next. This is the backup quarterback Graff.
Fumble.
Oh, hits Swan. Swan fumbles the football. Steelers must have gotten the ball back, though. They drive down the field. And I believe that's Roy Gerela with the game-winning field goal. So the Steelers defeat Houston. Minnesota loses to Detroit 27-17. Vikings are now 2-2. Seattle gets their first win 27-14 over the Patriots. Wow. New Orleans defeats San Diego. Giants even their record. San Francisco gets on the in the win column with a 19-0 win over Atlanta. Dallas wins 38-10. So that's a big win for them on the road against St. Louis. Redskins keep the Buccaneers winless with a 16-7 win down in Tampa Bay. So let's go to week number 5. Getting close to the midpoint here. And let's go ahead and see. Yeah, let's go ahead and reveal. Okay, Atlanta defeats Buffalo 27-3. Dallas defeats the Redskins. They stay unbeaten. Wow, Green Bay, big win over Detroit in Detroit, 45-10. Houston gets by Cleveland. Baltimore goes to 4-1, winning by a weird score, 21-2. Rams big over the Saints, 42-14. Jets upset the Dolphins in Miami, 29-14. Jets are 3-2. Right now, they're the surprise team, I think, of the first half of the season. They're doing it with a rookie quarterback. No more Joe Namath, who's now with the Rams. And there's a big showdown game there between the Vikings and the Bears. Vikings winning that first matchup between these two teams, 26-7. So those teams are now both tied at 3-2. Niners defeat the Giants at Giant Stadium, 22-13. Okay, first big showdown between the Broncos and the Raiders. Raiders get the best of Denver, 17-14. Let's take a look at that game. Looks like the Raiders went up 10-0. Broncos came back, scored 2 touchdowns to take the lead in the fourth quarter. Let's take a look at that. All right, there's an interception. Looks like Kirk Gowdy's voice is now working for some reason. That's good. Not sure why that wasn't working before, but it's working now. So okay. Okay, so Philadelphia defeats St. Louis. The Bengals upset the Steelers, giving Pittsburgh their first loss of the season, 20-17. Cincinnati is now 3-2. Let's take a look at that game. All right, looks like they went ahead in the fourth quarter by 10 points. A little bit of rain at Three Rivers. There's Ken Anderson to Bill Brooks. That's loud. So that's how that game ended. The Chargers defeating the Patriots. And in the second, called Expansion Bowl 2, Seattle defeats Tampa Bay 10-7. All right, so let's go to week number 6. All right. All right, week 6, we've got the Browns beating Buffalo, the Bears defeating Atlanta, Denver recovers from their loss to the Raiders, and they defeat Cincinnati 13-9. Big showdown game in Los Angeles between the Vikings and the Rams. The Rams get the best of Minnesota this time, 20-17 in overtime. Let's take a look. Rams go up 17-7. Vikings tie it. Final play of the game. A touchdown pass from Tarkenton to Ahmad Rashad. Puts the game into overtime. And here it looks like Chuck Foreman loses the football.
A fumble.
So the Rams take over. And they win it on a Septien field goal.
The kick. Good.
There you go. All right. Here's another close one. The Dolphins winning in overtime over Seattle. Let's take a look at that one. Winning on a Norm Bulash 3-yard touchdown run. So Miami wins that ball game. They go to 4-2. Baltimore edges New England 18-17. Patriots are now 2-4. So they're falling outside the playoff run here. Raiders defeat the Jets 27-13. Dallas shuts out Philadelphia. I think that's the second straight shutout win for the Cowboys. Pittsburgh wins easily over Houston. San Diego evens their record, defeating Kansas City. And Detroit defeats San Francisco. They're now above 500. St. Louis shuts out New Orleans. Packers in a close, boring game defeats the Buccaneers. True battle of the, what did called the Battle of the Bays, but what did Chris Berman call the Bay of Pigs? There you go. And the Redskins just getting by the Giants 10-9 to even their record. All right, so let's go to week 7, and this will be the last week that we quick sim. And then we'll look at the standings. So Minnesota gets a really low-scoring, close win over Atlanta at 11-7. Showdown game in Baltimore between the Steelers and the Colts. I don't remember that game in real life, but yeah, looks like they matched up in Baltimore. Colts won that game 26-7. Burt Jones was the star of that game, so no surprise there. Houston defeats Cincinnati. The Browns defeat Kansas City. Kansas City hasn't won a game yet. Dallas, another shutout win. How many is that? Let's take a look real quick. Oh, I thought they had a shutout win again in week 5. Okay, so they did have a shutout win against Tampa Bay back in week 3. That's their third shutout win. So they're on a roll. 34-0 over Detroit. That's close to, I think I saw that game. I remember watching that game in real life. I think they won something like 34-6 or something like that. So real close. Denver beats Oakland 17-0. So that's a big showdown win for the Broncos. So they are taking control of the West there. The Bears defeat the Packers 28-16. They're now 5-2. Chargers and Dolphins both are 4-3 now. If the Chargers win that game, 22-17. New England shuts out the Jets. New Orleans upsets Los Angeles. That's a huge upset, 21-17. Let's see what happened there. Archie Manning with 2 touchdown passes. Well, Rams had a chance late. Let's see what happened. And Pat Hayden looks like he throws an interception. Here you go. And that's how that game ends. Excuse me. All right. Tampa Bay gets their first victory, a 21-3 win over the 49ers. Seattle defeats Buffalo. The Giants defeat St. Louis, and the Redskins, they're above 500. They defeat the Eagles 17-7. So nothing too shocking yet at the halfway point of the season. Pretty much going as you would expect. Some teams performing a little bit better than you would expect. Some teams maybe not doing so well. But Dallas being clearly ahead of everyone in the East, definitely not a surprise there. I remember they went 12-2 that year, and they lost to St. Louis on a Monday night, and then they came back the following week and lost in Pittsburgh. And those are the 2 games they lost. So they are tracking along exactly how they did in real life. They're 7-0. They're a full 3 games ahead of Washington. The Bears are ahead of everybody in the Central by 1 game. So looks like the Bears are in good position there. Just have a 1-game lead. The Vikings and Packers are right there with them. They still have to play the Packers one more time and the Vikings. So we'll see how that goes in the second half of the season. Rams are out in front in the West, but by only a game. Surprisingly, the Saints are right behind them at 3-4, and the Saints just beat the Rams. So far, oh no, yeah, they did beat the Saints in week 5. So there you go. In the AFC, you've got Baltimore ahead by 2 games. Steelers are ahead by 2 games in the Central. And Denver's ahead by a game and a half in the West. With the Raiders there as so far they're the wild card team if the season were to end today. Who would the wild card be in the NFC if the season were to end today? That's a good question. It would be between Washington, Minnesota, and Green Bay. And it looks like Washington and Minnesota both have the same conference record. They haven't met head-to-head. At least I don't think they have. They have not. So we'll see how that goes. So those are the standings. Let's look at the injuries. Terry Metcalf out 4 weeks. That's a huge loss for St. Louis. Danny Buggs. He's big name wide receiver for the Redskins. At least he was in 77. Mark Van Egan out a week for the Raiders. Let's look at the season leaders. So for passing, Richard Todd. Yeah, the Jets are performing really well. And he's way out in front in terms of passing yards. terms of touchdowns, it's between Jim Zorn and Craig Morton. And passer rating, it's no surprise there. Burt Jones, Neil Graff, again, the backup quarterback for the Steelers. Bradshaw has missed 3 games. It looks like he's back, though. But Neil Graff, looking at his ratings, looks like he did really well at avoiding interceptions. But nothing too exceptional. But, man, of course, he only had 85 attempts, but not bad. Ken Stabler is the 4th-rated passer, followed by Roger Staubach. So there you go with passing. Let's see. Rushing yards. Walter Payton, as he did 76, is leading the pack with 775 yards, 5.2 yards a rush, followed by Franco Harris, Lydell Mitchell, Mark Van Egan, Dorsett, and McCutcheon, etc., etc. Franco Harris leads the league in rushing touchdowns. Receiving receptions, it's Bob Chandler of the Bills, followed by Gene Fugit. Yardage, it's Wesley Walker, followed by Harold Jackson, and then Lynn Swan. Touchdowns, Harold Jackson. Defense, Willie Lanier leads the league in tackle. Willie Lanier, boy, he's been in the league for a while. He's age 32. Seems like he's been around a lot longer than that. Sacks, 18 sacks. Oh, my goodness. Oh, my goodness. 18 sacks in 7 games. Ken Sanders. The pass rushing rating of 8. Wow. Okay. Interceptions, there's a 4-way tie between Randy Logan, Len Barney, Virgil Ivers, and Aaron Kyle. All right. Let's take a look at week number 8. Let's see, which game are we going to feature? Well, that's a big one right there. Washington and Baltimore. The Battle of Ohio, Pittsburgh and Denver. That's a big one. Okay, so we have two big games there. Washington, Baltimore, good interconference game there. Pittsburgh and Denver. Let's go ahead and preview this one real quick. Baltimore by 7, over under 28. Let's see how this one looks. This one is Denver by 3 with an over under of 31. That might be a little bit more interesting. Let's see. Let's see how the rest of the schedule looks. Chicago at Houston. I remember that one in real life. That did not end well for the Bears. Just out of curiosity, let me see what the point spread is. Yeah, Bears by 2. And how it ended. Let's see. Buccaneers at the Rams, St. Louis at Minnesota, Miami at the Jets, Dallas at the Giants, Seattle, Oakland, New Orleans, Philadelphia. I think we're going to probably do this one right here. Pittsburgh and Denver. That's going to be the feature game for week number 8. All right. So there you go. So 1977 is in gear, halfway through the season already, and we'll be back here in a few days to pick it up where we left off with week number 8. So thanks for watching.